Boom! According to that, I am live. Welcome. My name is Hiko Simon. This is Tokyo Tonight. It's 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time, same time it is every week. Great to see you all. Great to see people already hanging out in the chat. Looks like going from the top, we've already got Aaron, Kerberos, Tenshi, Quint Ranked, PB. Good to see you, PB. One Johnson, Mr. Cordy Chep. Yeah, nice to see everybody already hanging out. Good to see you all. Hope you're having a good week. Having an interesting week here. First question, actually, is anyone listening to the audio version of this? I guess if you're here, you're watching it live, so you wouldn't really need to watch it again unless you really, really liked it. But I'm kind of curious if that's useful. I mean, honestly, the way that using anchor.fm, I find it so easy to make the episodes there like right after the show. I do cut out the chit-chat bit at the start, so it's a little bit shorter. But other than that, I actually find it super easy to make, and it seems to be free. So I'm going to keep doing that anyway if people enjoy that. But yeah. In terms of what's going on in Tokyo, I'll be talking about it, Corona and so on, a little bit in the topics, although not a lot to say. It does appear that in terms of the daily numbers of cases, we seem to have topped out at around 20,000 cases. It's not going up anymore. Of course, there are things like we've run out of tests, for example. There are shortages of those. Also, hospitals, deaths are going up, hospitals are filling up. So there are some factors there that the numbers are not necessarily the same value, as when there were tons of tests and they were giving them out for free before. But even with all of that, the trend looks consistent, even in places that do not have shortages of tests and so on. It looks like, again, following Okinawa on the same sort of curve and timeline, it appears to be topping out, which is a good thing. Although that said, it's like, nearly 10 times more what it was during the last wave. So it still isn't a good situation at all. On top of that, just a few hours ago, I learned that, my lad's school, someone in his class got it. So his whole class is getting tested tomorrow. Most of the time this happens with other classes, and we get emails out through the school, and they sort of explain that, tested the whole class and everyone was clear, or, there was one other person or whatever. But there haven't been any real clusters. So hopefully, even with that one case, it's the closest, I guess, it's come. I haven't, given that I haven't been going into the office or meeting anyone at work, it's really only meeting my family. So this is the first time there's been people, like in this case, my son being really close. So a wee bit concerned, but not really. I mean, it's one of these things. I'm vaccinated. I'm being very careful. But at the same time, I mean, if my son gets it, I can't avoid it. And even being vaccinated, it isn't really at this point with Omicron. It's not the actual symptoms itself that I find scary. It's what I hear the accounts of what happens after the long. I mean, by what it sounds like, you just get little tiny clots like in your blood through your whole body, and it just messes with your brain and your everything else. It really messes people up. So. Even if it's a mild case of the actual coronavirus, it sounds like it can still cause trouble. So I definitely don't want to get it. I'm definitely going to get my booster shot when I'm able to get it. Although obviously, that's kind of moot if we have a situation now. But like I said, I'm not too worried. But that's an interesting thing that's happening. Some good news I will be talking about, which is that the government seems to finally be hearing the chorus of complaints. It is complicated. I guess we'll get into this. I see some countries have just decided, I think places like Australia and UK have just decided, okay, we've been trying at this too hard for too long. And, the death rates are sufficiently low and so on now that, we're just going to stop. And they're just throwing open borders and so on. And I think there's some merit to that. And they're obviously doing that deliberately. Japan is still, in the same way that it was. We've never had hard lockdowns, but we have locked down the border pretty hard, which is, of course, very frustrating to people wanting to come in. So, yeah, hoping to get word on that this week, although it didn't happen. So hopefully this next week there'll be more details on exactly who's going to come in and how. Given that there are over 400,000 people waiting right now, again, I'll go into this in more detail in the topics. But, even if they let everybody in, it's going to take a long time. But still some good news on that. How is everybody else doing? Kerberos Tenshi, glad to hear that you got your booster shot. Well done. Joe Smith, hello, good to see you. Andrew, welcome to the chat. We've got Ada Void, good morning. Milena, good to have you in here, Milena. Just in terms of other things that are going on, it's been, of course, as always, super quiet. I didn't shave today, I'm a bit scruffy, and plus I'm using the nice camera, so that is more obvious at the moment. Yeah, we're supposedly getting. They told us that we were going to have another big snowfall like earlier in the week, and that turned out just to be a whole bunch of slushy sleet that washed away like right away. They're saying that overnight tonight we might have another big snowfall, but again, I was out earlier this evening and it was raining and horrible, but it wasn't anywhere near cold enough to be snow. So I think that's going to be another. They're telling everyone to be careful, of course, because people in Tokyo can't handle it. Um, but yeah, the other thing which I've done this week, which was kind of interesting, was I had some a few years ago. I got into the family tree thing, and it's actually amazing with the way the technology is advancing now. You can get DNA tests, and and they keep creating digital databases of all these paper files all over the place, and now they're using AI and whatever, which just means every few years it is interesting to come back if you're ever into family tree, sort of researching. And it's amazing. You'll find things, you'll find new leads, and you'll find a bunch of connections where you had dead ends a few years ago. And someone asked me a question about my family tree a few years ago, and actually this week someone came back and asked me a question about a family tree that I'd made more than 10 years ago, and that prompted me to start like pulling on the little thread just to see if there was anything else there. And it turns out there's like a ton. So I've just spent, even tonight, I've been going through just sort of connecting all the extra dots. It's actually, if you've ever done it, it's pretty. It becomes like Pokemons. You just got to, have this completionist thing that you got to fill it all in. Obviously, coming from a place like New Zealand, it means that there are people, like connected to me all around the world. I mean, I have relatives today, traceable relatives in the United States, in Europe, UK, being separate to Europe, in places like India. Obviously me being in Japan makes me a little bit exotic as well. Obviously New Zealand and Australia, places like that. But yeah, it's really. Plus, I've got a ton of stuff just stored on my computer, so it's kind of been fun sharing that and just discovering new connections, especially like where I thought the dead ends were. Like we thought we couldn't go back further than this, so I've had a lot of fun with that. For people, some people in the chat, it's kind of funny. I actually have some Detroit connections, not in a direct line. There were some brothers and sisters, and one went to Detroit and the rest went to New Zealand. But a bunch of Detroit connections actually, which I thought was kind of cool. They're not there right now, but yeah, it's again, it's just kind of funny. To me, it strikes me as a good excuse for, especially after the pandemic. I'm already planning it. It'd be cool to take a trip through Eastern Europe and Britain and America and India just to see if I can connect with some of the relatives and so on. It'd be kind of fun. So anyway, that's been my week. It's been fairly quiet, as I'm sure it's been for everybody. Great to see more people rocking in. We've got John Carlo Lanoy. Good to have you in here indeed. Believe in yourself. Greetings right back at you. And everybody, remember, if you are lurking, say hello. It's always nice. It's part of what I enjoy most about the show, is to say hello to everybody at the start of the show. Not a lot of topics tonight, and plus because I was like distracted on the family tree thing on top of that, there's I really threw this all together at the last moment, although you know how that goes. Just because I don't have a lot of topics or think I'm going to talk very long doesn't mean that I won't. By the way, I haven't been, I guess two things I haven't gotten the topics that I'm not really planning to talk about. One is the Winter Olympics. As much as I would like to say that I'm boycotting it over the genocide in Xinjiang, I can't really. I mean, by the same logic, I've boycotted every Winter Olympics ever. It's really lack of interest. I'm not going to be so self-righteous as to, try to credit my otherwise lack of interest anyway into, making a political stand about anything. I mean, truth is, the politics is the politics. I'm glad that African countries boycotted the 1976 Summer Olympics because of New Zealand. New Zealand needed to wake up and beat up on South Africa as it was supposed to, and New Zealand beating up on South Africa with holding rugby played a major factor in the end of apartheid in that country. So it is effective, actually. It was the right thing to do. So you can mix sports and politics, but all of that said, I appreciate the hard work and the talents and the efforts of the athletes, as well as even in China, there's thousands of regular people who are organizers and so on. And I know what that's like. I've been involved in. My father was CEO of Commonwealth Games in 1990 in Auckland, so I've been right in the middle for like a couple of years of seeing the organisation of one of these things for like 1/3 the scale of the Olympics. So I do appreciate that. And look, again, we only see the Japanese stuff here. Really cool to see New Zealand got its first ever gold medal. That was crazy cool. Also great to see, of course, the Japanese. The snowboarding events are pretty cool. I mean, the fact is, wherever you are, you only see the events that your country's in. I don't like the nationalism of it, but yeah, so I'm finding it very interesting, just to tell you the truth. But there's that. The other thing, of course, is Ukraine. Kind of interesting as well. Given that, again, the extra little threads I've been pulling on include Ukraine. I mean, again, when you get to hundreds and thousands of people, it includes, more Romania than Ukraine, but I've got bits and pieces out there, including a place which I really want to go now, which is a little town called Sulina, which is actually it's on the Black Sea, as close to Ukraine as you can get. It's just across the Danube. So I must admit, you sort of see this, and you see, I have family in Crimea, for example, and obviously, that place is a bit messed up at the moment. But this is all more than 100 years ago. So I'm not going to feign true connection with any of these places. But that said, it is crazy to me in this day and age that we are talking about, we are looking apparently seriously at Russia, like fully invading Ukraine. Just seems nuts to me. And you could get the idea that from Donbass and from Crimea that maybe it's going to be easy and Ukraine isn't going to put up much of a fight, and America's not going to do, and NATO's not going to do anything to help them, which is probably what's encouraged, Putin to take it as far as he has. It does seem like it's a little bit different this time. I loved watching I was fascinated by watching the Vice News coverage of the Donbass and the Ukraine conflict, the Crimea conflicts. And I remember one thing that really stood out was just how unequipped and frankly unmotivated and unpaid the Ukrainian troops were, and they were completely unable to handle that. And what's been happening in the meantime, obviously there's been a lot of analysis as to the failures, in the Ukrainian military until that time. Now, it's not clear if they're actually anywhere near improved, including willingness to fight and whatever. But what does seem pretty clear is that, when you watch, even on Vice News, when you watched it, every time the Russians just pulled up one tank, the Ukrainians, on every checkpoint didn't have any weapons to do anything about it. They'd have to just move their checkpoints back down the road to wherever the separatists had heavy armor. So it looks like what Britain and America have been doing is pretty much what they did with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. They're just giving them a whole bunch of shoulder-launched mobile stuff to shoot basically tanks, anti-tank weapons. I wonder if they're giving them Stinger missiles as well. And, so, in terms of equipment, it seems that, you're not going to have a whole lot of powerless, Ukrainian troops helplessly walking back along roads. If this happens, they're going to, actually face hardware which can actually hurt the Russians. And they're going to do it. Like, people are going to really die over this. I really, really hope that that's not the case. I can't believe in this day and age that people would be so stupid, but they are, and I feel bad for the troops, even the Russian troops. Actually, I mean, again, they're just like the Olympics volunteers. They're just doing their jobs. But I do hope it doesn't end in conflict. I actually am super happy that this does seem to be giving new life to NATO, which kind of was losing its sense of purpose until this, which I think is where this has sort of failed. But it's fascinating to watch anyway. It's kind of funny how, people are trying to, the US included, is trying to tie this to Taiwan. And, and again, China's playing along, saying that they'll, you get Ukraine and we'll get Taiwan and that kind of thing. And even linking it to the northeastern territories issue, the Kuril Islands issue, which Russia has with Japan, where Russia, again, has just recently done military exercises on those islands, which for a long time it didn't do, just sort of out of courtesy. Which again just annoys Japan. Japan's not really going to oppose that. But America seems to be also checking Japan's ready for a contingency where Japan has to supply US forces fighting to support Taiwan, or to supply Taiwan directly in the case of aggression against Taiwan. And they're linking it to Ukraine, which it just seems insane to me that we're even talking about this at the moment. Again, I don't know. I don't think borders have to change. I mean, even though I recognize that a lot of borders in the world are settled from historically from positions of injustice, what can you do, right? So anyway, those are just general stuff in the news that's got me interested. We will get into the topics on Japan at the moment. Aaron says they're not even showing the Olympics. By the way, big reminder there that, yes, indeed, do what Kubris Tenshi did. Say my name. If you just say my name, Hiko Simon, it will flash up orange. You'll get my attention when I'm scanning through the comments that way. Just if you don't want to say something to me, remember you can make a comment to get my attention. You can make a request. You can ask a question. I will always come back to it. Otherwise, I'm going to charge through the topics. I'll check the comments a little bit after each one. I'd love if you, even if you've got nothing to say, just say hello. It's very nice to say hello. Drop an emoji in. I do like that. Also, remember, if you like the video, do not forget to like. It really does help the video, and that's pretty much the only thing I'm doing this for now anyway. So I do appreciate that. Quick scan through. Kubris Tenshi has connections to Scotland and Mongolia. I got a ton of Scotland connections. I must admit, I'm kind of guilty. I am mostly, Ireland, Scotland, England, which I find kind of boring. I find, America and Europe more exotic, but it's just tiny, tiny parts compared to everything else. Mongolia is super cool there. See, if I was you, I would be like straight on the, whoa, Mongolia, I got to figure that one out. The truth is, I mean, it's all the same, right? And they've all contributed equal DNA amounts to me, so I should really be much more interested in Scotland and North England. But, but I would be running after figure out a Mongolian connection. That's super cool. Anyway, got Comics Plus. Aka-san, good to have you in here. Thank you. I didn't see till after the trouble that you were having with editing the reaction to the final episode of Book of Boba Fett. I loved it, by the way. I really appreciate. I became part of my routine to watch your reactions after I watched each of the episodes. So thank you for that service that you're doing, Aka-san. I really do love your channel. I don't watch the reactions to things I'm not interested in, which frankly, the Marvel stuff is a big chunk of that I don't really watch. But the Star Wars stuff, I'm all in, and I do. I mean, I don't have to promote your channel, given that your channel's like a million times bigger than mine. But yeah, everybody should check out Aka-san's channel. And it was kind of funny. There was one aspect of that. If you're watching a Book of Boba Fett, I'm chasing another squirrel here. There was talk about the deep faking of Luke Skywalker, and it was not just the face. They were doing it for the voice as well, clearly. I mean, I suspect they were using Mark Hamill's real voice, but he's got an old man's voice now, and you could tell it was a young person's. They were deep faking the voice as well. A lot of people, including Aka-san, trapped in Uncanny Valley. To that, it's funny, if you watch the Toy Galaxy episode talking about the movie Tron. Tron, when it came out in the 1980s, that was the first movie ever to use computer graphics, and that whole look of the whole movie. I mean, the plot's not bad. It's not bad. It's not great, but it's an okay plot. But the whole look of the movie and the design and how original it was at the time. I mean, Tron is one of the most groundbreaking movies ever, and yet it wasn't nominated for any Academy Awards because people thought that people didn't understand what computers were, and they thought that using computer graphics somehow you were having a robot doing all the work for you, a bit like people think about AI today, and they thought it was cheating. And so the Academy, it was so breakthrough and innovative, nobody knew what to do with it, and it felt like it was cheating. So they didn't allow it to be nominated for example, not even nominated for Best Special Effects, the movie Tron. And I really think what's happening with all the deep fake stuff right now is a bit like that as well. People are a bit spooked by the technology. There's a very true Uncanny Valley thing where if it was more crappy, we'd be more comfortable with it because, we can laugh at it, but it's close enough but it's just off. It doesn't feel right, and that leaves us feeling very irked. With the voice and with the face, but it's getting so good. And it's like with computer graphics. You put up with crappy computer graphics in movies in the 1980s and 1990s in order to get, the increasingly seamless. I mean, the Unreal Engine 5 stuff, I mean, remember, most of Book of Boba Fett is now using a game engine, Unreal. They're using the Fortnite engine for all the landscapes, and you don't notice it. That's how good it's getting. And it's the same with the deepfake technology. It's brand new. You got to let them use it, and I think Star Wars is the best place. I mean, you talk about a place that innovated a lot of technology when no one knew how to use it. For making films, and I really do think, as creepy as the idea is, that I will be able to probably, when I'm like 60 years old, a long time from now, I expect it to be possible for anybody, the same way that you can create a little CG animation by yourself. You'll be able to create a John Wayne movie with John Wayne and John Wayne's voice when he's like 25, and it would look like a movie. And again, the idea of it's going to really freak people out that you can revive and animate and make dead people act like the way, however you want them to. But that kind of, this is I think it's the same discomfort we have with that as the same discomfort people used to have with the idea even of photos and film. They didn't like the idea of showing film or photos of people when that was brand new. It freaked people out. And this is the next push on that. But it's going to happen. It is going to unleash new potential for creativity and the ability to make better movies, where you're not going to need actors even, frankly. And I don't know. I'm glad Star Wars is doing it. The fact that the stuff that they did with Luke Skywalker in Book of Boba Fett, I thought it was uncanny valley, and it wasn't perfect, but it was whoa. And I want them to keep doing it. So that's just me. Anyway, you had a great discussion on it. I just had to get my 2 cents in, and that was too much to put in a tweet. But love your channel, Akasan. Kran, good to see you, Kran. Who else we got in here? PB, good to have you in here. Christopher Luke, really burns through your speakers. Talking about something there, but good to have you in here anyway. Tron has a plot. I thought it was a music video. Well, it kind of has a plot. I mean, again, there's a bit of cyber gibberish and so on, technobabble through the whole thing, but it was still pretty cool. Jex Ashbolt, so you are 2% Austronesian and you have a Maori great-grandmother somewhere. That is cool. I think that is like, for me, it's the small things like that are like cool. And 2% is actually not insignificant, because if you think about, again, that's like 3 or 4 generations away. That's not very far away. That's cool. Some people, one thing, never get into genealogy, by the way, if you're sensitive about, imagine think about how complicated your families are now. Divorces, remarriages, affairs, births out of wedlock, conflict, one-night stands, think about the potential issues that can happen when you have exponential numbers of people multiplying over a very short period of time from you. People who get into genealogy hoping to find a pure bloodline to kings and queens, you should never look up their family tree. You have to sort of be into finding out stuff like that. I mean, you have to think that's cool to get into it. I mean, so that is awesome, Jax Ashbolt. Thank you for sharing that as well. Every time it gets updated, I find out, I seem to be finding out I'm more Scottish every time it comes up. I always thought I was Yorkshire, which is Viking, basically, which sounds cool, but, the Vikings weren't very well behaved in England. They weren't very nice people. And they had a town, York. They just took over York and made it their capital in UK. So that was like a weird place, and that's where all I thought my ancestors came from. But it turns out, it was Scotland for me, which is pretty boring. But I found out little bits and pieces, a little bit of West Africa and a little bit of Cypriot, little bits of this and that, Russian and so on. That's all cool to me. It's great to find out. That is really interesting. I love that stuff. Sainted Sir, good to have you in here. Quint Rankid, have I watched the DNA reveal episodes? I've seen those. I've done all that myself, so I've kind of done the DNA reveal on myself. I must admit, it is super awkward in America, because there's a 50% chance you're going to find out that you're, someone within 2 or 3 generations either owned slaves or was a slave, or in probably a lot of families, they have both at the same time. I must admit, for all the bad stuff that I've found out, including some pretty alarming photos of distant cousins that moved to South Africa and went to a photo studio with photos that I don't think they were even politically correct in 1930. And what was basically, I've seen some stuff, I've seen some stuff that would be awkward in a series like that, but in America, man, you guys have next level everything. I'm always impressed by that. Quentin Rankin, yeah, you know what? I'm probably misquoting the summary of Tron, and again, the Toy Galaxy episode talking about it on YouTube is excellent and entertaining. I highly recommend it. But it was like super breakthrough for what it was trying to do at the time anyway, and the fact it didn't even get a nomination because the Academy thought it was cheating was just like hilarious. Akasan, I do believe in moving forward as well, with not being too nostalgic. I do agree with that, but I think the idea of being able to pull up characters, oh man, I want them to do a Cad Bane spin-off series now. He was so cool. It's like Darth Maul. They bring in a cool bad guy and they kill him, and I know he's in Clone Wars, and I know he's even in the Bad Batch, and I loved him in the Bad Batch, so yeah, I do believe in moving forward, but I like that it's just another tool that you have to make cooler stuff, and I think we should just focus on getting better at it than setting it aside. That's just me. PB, after the original Dune came out a few years after Tron, the graphics were 2D. Yeah, I've seen the old Dune movie, and it is really terrible. Yeah, so much so I'm not sure I even want to watch the new one, but we'll see. King Sam, Toy Galaxy had a great video on the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle film recently. Yes, they did, and I saw it, and it was very good. It was amazing, actually. I had no idea that movie actually ran out of budget, and they released it basically recut and incomplete, and it became such a huge hit. That was really, really cool. Sainted Sir, good to see you. We've got DJ Sunnyside Up, great to see you. Quint Rankin, I've read that one. Christopher Luke, you have a British hairline. Yeah, I basically look like every hooligan from haunted videos at soccer games that you can get, pretty much. Yeah. Still waiting to find out. You're in the Kerberos Tenshi. Might be related to Obi-Wan and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Pretty cool. John Carlo Lanoy, do I have Filipino friends there in Japan? Right now, probably 2 that I know, and I'm not really in touch with them. I don't know a lot of Filipino people. Small number, I suppose, but yeah, no, I mean, at the moment, I'm not in touch with anybody. Of course, there are tons of Filipinos. I mean, many times more Filipinos. I mean, there's only 3,000 New Zealanders in all of Japan. So I think there's 10 times, literally, the number of Filipinos from that. But yeah. Quint Rankett, yes, a little warning that police indeed do subpoena 23andMe and Ancestry and all of those DNA records, and they found the Golden State Killer that way. My thoughts on that are, yes, good to know. If I have a distant cousin who is the Golden State Murderer, take my DNA. Jeez, I'm not gonna, look, they're not going to be pulling DNA records for shoplifting. Who knows? They might do that one day, but given that they're using it really for serious crimes right now, but yes, I must admit there is a dystopian Black Mirror episode probably connected to me giving DNA today, but it is cool what you find out anyway. But yes, that's a fair warning there. Anyway, I'm going to get into the topics because we are half an hour through, and I've just been jabbering because I don't have that many topics. So let's jump in. Interesting that a Pachinko parlor operator was arrested for gambling. Apparently, again, I've talked about Pachinko on the show many times. It runs by this sort of system that you might want to call mandatory money laundering, which is that you basically are, when you go to Pachinko, you're basically just playing like a vertical pinball machine. If you know, except of having one pinball and keeping it like alive the whole time, you just put lots of pinballs in, and if you get the pinballs to hit certain points on the pinball machine, it'll generate more pinballs. And you know, at the end of the game, you can you know, if you do badly, the pinballs go away and you don't get them back, and if you do really well, they keep coming out. And in the end of it, you know, the more pinballs that you have, you can exchange it back. One, you have to pay to get the pinballs, but if you like increase your pinballs as you play, you can end up with these, you know, trays of pinballs, and you can exchange them, not for money, for like meaningless plastic trophies. And what the law requires is the 3-point system, which is that you can't collect money, because if you collect money in the Pachinko parlor, that's a casino. That's increasing your money based on a game of chance. And that is illegal gambling. However, if you only win a plastic trophy that you basically, so it's like a video games parlor where you pay your money, and you hand your ball bearings back in exchange for a plastic trophy, then you are not gambling. However, they will allow you to go across the road to a completely unrelated plastic trophy collection shop that will buy your trophy off you for mysteriously corresponding to amounts that you've paid to participate in the pachinko game. And this is somehow the economics. You've got a pachinko parlor that is theoretically just collecting money at a pawn shop across the road that's just somehow losing money on plastic trophies that they must sell back to the pachinko parlor. And so long as you're basically laundering the money of the pachinko parlor at the plastic trophy shop across the road from the pachinko parlor, the police let it go. And so you might ask, if that's the case, then why not just open a full casino running the same way? Why not just have a mahjong or a poker parlor where people can go and get a plastic trophy and collect it across the road? Some people have tried to do that, and they were all arrested. So the police seem to allow this system. They look the other way on the system, so long as it's stuck to only in the case of pachinko. However, it turns out that in Saitama Prefecture, there was a shop where they just got a little bit lazy, and just crossing the road just seemed too far for carrying the trophies. So the staff just decided that they would just buy the trophies back, or just give money back to people inside the pachinko shop, which I guess saves people 20 steps on their daily step count for going and exchanging the money. However, when it got out that they were handing money back over to the pachinko patrons, they were arrested. Not the patrons, the pachinko parlor operators, for running an illegal casino. You might ask why they don't police this when other types of gambling, when other types of casinos use the triangle, mandatory money laundering formula that works for pachinko. And it's complicated. It's actually my understanding of it. This probably goes much deeper than I can fully than I know or can fully explain. But it comes down to that after World War II, you had a lot of Koreans who became stateless when Korea became independent, who were stranded in Japan at the end of World War II. I mean, again, many of them traveled back, but some stayed in Japan. And they were discriminated. They weren't able to get regular jobs. They didn't have papers or anything like that. And those communities had to figure out basically how to protect themselves and how to survive. And one thing a lot of them did was they set up these pachinko parlors, which everyone enjoyed playing, which provided that community with a lot of income. And it was recognized that letting them keep the money from this illegal gambling basically meant that they could, it meant that it became a substitute for the Japanese government having to deal with them. It meant that they didn't have to pay them social welfare. They could take care of themselves if they could take money from gamblers, so long as they did it in a certain way that was sort of, out of sight, out of mind, and not making too much trouble. So of course there were gangsters running it. But it became this sort of lifeline, just like a lot of other immigrant communities and a lot of other countries get involved in gambling and so on, in gangs when they're when they're facing discrimination in isolated communities. And basically it was recognized in Japan that so long as they sort of followed certain rules, they would be allowed to do it, and it would actually be beneficial to the Japanese government to not have to then do things like give them citizenship or pay them social welfare. So basically, people just looked the other way on this the whole time. The big irony is that pachinko in Korea is illegal. And in Japan, a country where gambling is illegal, there are estimated 10 to 20 million gambling addicts from pachinko. And when they have it in Korea, it was made illegal because of all the social problems that it was generating. Yet when Japan, apparently I've read stories that Japan considered banning pachinko 20 years ago, and the Korean president called up and said, please don't ban it in Japan because it's really essential for the Korean community there. And the Japanese government decided against it, but yet Korea itself makes it illegal. So you have this kind of, there are a lot of books that talk about this, and particularly the, at least in the post-war period, the Korean angle. I think it's not so accurate today to paint it as Korean. In fact, it was, and when we say Korean, not just South Korean, North Korean. There were a lot of North Korean citizens in Japan who, there was a thing when North Korea started testing missiles, people noted the irony that Japanese gambling addicts were paying for the missiles that were being shot at them. Yet for all of this, the associations with that are now pretty much gone. These are all just regular big corporations now. A lot of them do have do trace that sort of a history. Yet it is still funny. It's just one of these things where, the law kind of just looks the other way conveniently at this, and there are in some ways altruistic reasons for doing so. But obviously, yeah, when a couple of bozos in Saitama just stop crossing the road to exchange their plastic trophies, everybody's thrown in jail. So that is funny. I mean, it's just a huge, and it's like they're forcing them to launder the money. It's like they're forcing them to set up a sandwich shop that never has any customers and generates $100,000 per year across the road to clean to remove the tracing from the gambling, even though it's like designed for that purpose. It is really strange, but of course it kind of defines a lot of the things that you see in Japan, where they'll overlook a lot of things that are technically illegal for the sake of social harmony, and have lots of meaningless rules on the flip side of that. Anyway, to the comments. Odie Jr., good to have you here in the comments. Who else is in here? Shubus, good to have you in here, Shubus. I think I said hello to you earlier, but nice to have our Panama representative in. I'm going to dive into the next topic, which is that in Osaka, it turns out that the daily numbers of coronavirus cases were getting entered into the HERSIS, which apparently required that every single case in Osaka, different prefectures use different systems for collecting coronavirus positive case information. The Osaka system required that data be sent to them in a fax format. There was like one or two fax machines, and that was not even a digital fax, it was an analog fax, and the records had to be sent one at a time, which takes about, they've got the information on here, it takes about 10 minutes per fax, because it's analog and it's one record per fax. And so when the Osaka numbers started getting over like 10,000 people per day, it turned out in the entire day of doing nothing but manually sending 10 minutes each fax of each case one by one, they were not able to physically send all the records within the deadlines, and this led to a cumulative number of 20,000 positive cases in Osaka not actually being included in official statistics because the faxes couldn't keep up. So clearly the problem here is that Osaka just needs to buy more faxes. I mean, trying to do all of this, but I mean, can you imagine sending, what is the math on that? What is 10 minutes per fax and 11,000 cases per day? How long would that take to fax? I mean, I've heard people defend faxes, saying that it is a rock solid, reliable, when computer systems go down, when email goes out, faxes, will survive nuclear war, and I'm sure they will, and that's why schools require them for sending, my kid's going to be late to school notices. But yeah, it is the joke, but it's funny because it's true. And in this case, the fact that this was Osaka, not some rural prefecture. Other places are collecting via electronic systems, but the fact that Osaka is not only sending by fax, but by like one fax, and that's this slow, got a lot of attention. So, Anyway, next story is that, this week, in fact, this culminated with Kishida actually announcing that they are considering easing non-resident foreigner entry ban in March. Not clear at all what that means yet. They have been they've allowed out of 400,000 people waiting, the government has allowed 10 jet teachers to come in on special circumstances, and hearing the background to even how those were picked, it's apparently the Japanese Ministry of Education contacted tens of thousands of people waiting, saying that if you can do all of these impossible things within the next 2 hours and confirm to us, and if you're in the first 10 in line, we can let you in the country. For people who have had their lives disrupted for 2 years, it's a little bit like they're getting played around. When the Prime Minister says that Japan is considering easing up the entry ban, specific lobby groups have been pointing out that Japan is running out of doctors and nurses and elderly care and so on, even in the normal circumstances, let alone with workers in a shortage because of being in isolation from being close contacts. So, there's been demands to allow nurses, apprentice workers, to basically farms ceasing to operate. A lot of small factories are not able to produce because they don't have the workers that they need. And of course, the education thing is now getting a lot of noise. The universities themselves rely on foreign students partly for income and for academic interaction, where Japan has basically become a bit of a sakoku. On top of that, European companies in particular, but a lot of foreign companies are also pointing out that they are reconsidering their investment plans for Japan. And this has led to even the Keidanren business group saying that if they don't allow foreign working visa people in, the idea that Tokyo is promoting, that Quake is promoting Tokyo as the replacement for Hong Kong as the international financial hub of Asia, yet at the same time they're not allowing any foreigners into the country. I mean, how is it supposed to be? It's like you're making Alcatraz, the international, travel hub. It's basically what they've done with the country here. So it is increasingly ridiculous. And it's funny, the media has been very uncritical of all of this. I guess people feel like it is safer to not have foreigners coming in. But of course, they're letting Japanese go in and come out. So in terms of, the exposure to foreign germs, it's pretty much irrational the way that they're doing it. No one can give an explanation. They just don't have a plan. And they said that they'd have a plan this week that they would announce. And the announcement was that, probably next week, we're going to announce a plan to do something in March. So they still don't have a plan. They still don't have a clue what they're going to do. I really think that, they should be, I can understand, I guess when you've got 400,000 people waiting to come in, even if they literally had no restrictions at all, it would probably still take like 6 months for them all to come in, with all the airports being completely packed every day, let alone having quarantine testing requirements. It's going to be a trickle. It's going to take a long time for everyone to come in, so they probably are going to prioritize what the economy and government considers highest priority, which I suspect will be probably apprentice visa workers, and it seems like exchange students and teachers are going to get dibs, which is annoying to me because I've got friends and co-workers that are waiting to come to work with me here in Japan, which I would like them to get in, but I don't think that's going to happen too soon. But I like just for there to be a plan. So good news is that it looks like the drone, even Nikkei has been basically bashing the government. Even Abe this week came out and said that the government's really screwing up with the shutting down of immigration, and it's making Japan look ridiculous, and it is inconsistent. Most other countries are now opening up. So even though we're still in the midst of really the peak of the worst COVID outbreak that we've had here in Japan, it looks like the government is going to listen, and they still haven't figured out exactly how they're going to do it, but we are going to have a resumption of travel, hopefully announced this week, with the first signs of that happening in March. So we'll see what happens with that. Akasan says, according to a survey among Japanese 32% of respondents support an immediate opening of the borders. 40% are in favor of a gradual opening, and 20% are opposed to a new opening. And you know what? I suspect the 28% would be a similar number in any country. In fact, that's probably like low. Even in countries like Australia or the UK, they're probably glad that they can go on vacations, but I'm sure they're never happy with letting foreigners come in and risk with that. It's really, you have to be connected with foreigners to really, you'd think if you in your daily life, if you don't feel like you have a student or a teacher or someone working for you that you need to come in, it's natural that people probably default to just think, why should we take the risk when I don't feel like it affects me? So those are still high numbers, I guess, opposed, and it shows it's maybe good politics for the Japanese government to remain conservative. Certainly, I don't think there's going to be a radical full opening. It's surprising, in fact, in Japan that 32% of people support that, but 40% probably that very gradual opening, and they're going to portray it as a very controlled opening, although I suspect what the Japanese government will do is they will portray it as a very small opening, but they'll probably make it quietly bigger as they go along. That's what they generally do with immigration. I hope that's what happens. Cobras Tenshi, Aaron, myself, and here, Lufthansa Technik, we still fax papers as well. That's a reliable form of technology. But then again, maintenance logs need to be kept on paper for 12 years. So that is another thing. There's a lot of laws which require hard copy records. Andrew, Hiko-Simon, they've already started notifying students waiting to enter in March. So there you go, they're already doing that. Local embassy was the last to know. That is also not surprising. Again, incredible how disconnected the Japanese government is, but what can you do? John Carlo Lanoy says, Happy Valentine's. Thank you. It's probably the only Happy Valentine's I'm going to get. Appreciate it. I do appreciate it. Savas, good to see you, Savas, musician. Sorry that you retracted your message, but hello, good to see you there in the chat anyway. Also, we've got Queen Dany Targaryen. Nice to have you in here. That sounds like a Mongolian name or something. Cool name. Like the handle, and good to have you in here. So yeah. Anyway, that's what's going on with the travel stuff. In Rage clickbait of the week, I can't even actually access this full story, Wall Street Journal, but of course it was getting forwarded that a woman who I can't, Chris, but Chris with a K, I can't believe. I'm sure that's like a pseudonym for Karen. A columnist for the Wall Street Journal said that basically, next time I come to your shoeless home, I will be wearing shoes. Of course, if you come from a culture where it's offensive, I will take them off. Or if I have like blood or feces on my shoes, I will take them off. But otherwise, the idea that your floors are not good enough for my shoes, please. More or less, the argument was summarized something like that, and it goes on and on and on. And I was. Yeah, it's outrage. It was just design. A lot of people reacted as I did, and I felt like responding. Well, let me write you a response next week explaining why when I visit your home, I'm going to kick your dog. I mean, it's pretty much the same level of, geez, I'm just going to be a bad person. Why? There's a thing which when you come to Japan, and when you have a shoeless home, I grew up in a culture, in a country where we would wear shoes inside the house, and you'd have a shoe closet in your bedroom, and sometimes I'd go barefoot around the house, sometimes I'd wear socks around the house, and sometimes you'd wear shoes in the house. There was no you'd have the work boots outside, but so for me it was an adjustment coming to Japan. And I remember on my first trip to Japan on a high school exchange in Fukuoka, where I went and put my shoes on. They were lace-up shoes in the genkan, and then I realized my bag was out of reach, and I thought, well, this is just silly. I'm just going to take like one step, stretch out and get it. So I just put my shoe on one place, just on the regular floor, to get my bag. And the mum saw it and she freaked out, and I thought, wow, what is wrong with her? It was just like one step, and I'm being good enough. Surely like one step is okay. But now I totally see it from the perspective. Once you assume that basically the outside world is just coated in blood and feces and other fluids, you can't unsee that, whether it's true or not, actually. And streets in Tokyo and Japan are pretty clean as things go, but you just can't really unsee that once you come back in. The idea of there being dirt on the floor in the house is just anywhere, and the idea that people believe that they don't have dirt on their shoes. Again, it's just one of those things that when I travel, I can go back, I guess, but you can't really unsee the germs once you've seen them. It's like a superpower that, it's like you've got X-ray vision. You can't like unhave that when you have that. You just see it everywhere. The fact is, it sounds like a lot of people in Europe and America nowadays see the same thing, even without the culture thing. And this is the other thing as well. Wearing shoes inside a Japanese person's house is not like offensive to their culture. It's offensive to their sense of common sense. This is it. You are tramping crap through the house. It's the same. It is the same as if you were going through a Caucasian person's house that had no shoes. I mean, seriously, once you see the shoes as dirty, you cannot unsee them. There's no difference whether it's a Thai person's house or a Japanese person's house or a English person's house. If they have a no shoes thing, there's it's the idea that you'd separate based on the race of the people whose house it is. That it's okay, I'm going to be a scumbag to Caucasians, but I'll be respectful to Asian people who look Asian. I mean, what do you do with half Asian people? And by the way, I mean, I have, as someone who has half Japanese friends in New Zealand, I do remember the crazy things when you try to frame the world neatly in terms of cultures and races and stuff like that, and you run into people who visually and culturally are in the middle. And your whole ability to focus and understand the world just fails. I've seen this happen a few times. Like people handing out in the Japanese souvenir shop where I was, Japanese person, they hand the Japanese instruction kit, and me they gave the English one. And then my half Japanese coworker, this guy looked at my friend like she was out of focus. And again, yes, it's just a silly person being silly. It's entertaining. We all got to throw rocks all together as the internet, and it was fun. And I'm looking forward to the next installment. Dan H, what are my thoughts on the US and Japan have rolled back Trump era steel tariffs? I see this as a way to soften up relations with Japan to strengthen anti-China sentiment. I'm actually kind of surprised that Biden, frankly, has left for so long so much of the BS stuff that Trump arranged. I mean, on the one hand, it was a blip in the news here that they've dropped the steel tariffs, which made no sense in the first place. I mean, Japan isn't a major steel power anymore. Korea totally has taken over Japan in that regard. A lot of other countries have as well. So yeah, I think it's a sign of good faith that they're cooperating. But you know what? There was a similar thing, the base fee contributions. You know how, Trump said that everybody's freeloading on, they're not paying us enough protection. And he's an isolationist, and the people who voted for him are also isolationists. They believe that the US doesn't have to be the world's police force and risking its lives to save everybody else, which is a legitimate point of view as a voter. I point out America actually is in Japan and Germany and other places protecting its own interests, rather than altruistically just there to defend Japan and Germany. But most Americans don't understand that, and most politicians think Americans are too stupid to explain that to them, which is insulting, and they should explain it and be transparent about it. But Trump played into the populist idea that we shouldn't be having bases all around the world and trying to be the world's police. And if we are doing that and we're doing this thing for them, not for ourselves, which is a lie, by the way, we should make them pay for it. And they actually got Japan, the highest contributor on base fees of any country in the world, to agree to a massive increase in contributions to Japanese forces and bases in Japan. And that actually, what was agreed with Trump, wasn't implemented until under Biden. They let them do that. So Biden has sort of, on other things, you might think that if they wanted to shore up actual defense relations, they might wind back, Trump demanding protection money from Japan, and they didn't do that. The steel tariffs, again, was just a ridiculous. The fact that he kept coming up with, going back to the 1980s and wanting to ban car imports and stuff like that again, thankfully not doing it, but doing it with steel, I think shows also that, in a way, the Trump era policies were playing into the people who used to vote for Democrats and people who were afraid of steel imports endangering steel jobs in America. Those were union jobs that used to vote Democrat, and now they vote Republican Trump. So in a way, it might backfire as well, the fact that Biden decided to wind that one back. But I think it's why I'm surprised that actually Biden hasn't wound back much more of what Trump did. And I think the reason that he hasn't is that he recognizes that, as much of a maniac as Trump was, what he did was popular. And, and Biden undoing too much of it probably risks alienating even more people who used to vote for Democrats and feel like they've been sold out. I guess it's a token gesture to get Japan on side. It is good in a way. Vladimir Putin, I think, has done America a huge favor, highlighting the need for its alliances and for other countries, to making other countries in Europe and Asia realize that they do rely on Japan, on the United States for security. So yeah, not a lot of deep analysis. I think it's a nice token gesture. I think America could and should have done a lot more. I'm surprised it's let a lot of Trump era policies remain. In fact, Biden's followed through. We've talked about the other things that Biden's followed through on, things that Trump started. But I'm glad this one that they wound back, certainly. Yeah, interesting topic there. Thank you, Dan H., as always. Kubris Tenchi, you sent me the first picture of the James Webb telescope took. Did I see it? I have not seen it. They're not supposed to be taking like proper photos for like another, for another few months. They'll still be aligning the optics, I think, at the moment. I'm curious. I will take a look. Did you say if you send that to me on Twitter, I'll take a look after. Akasan, I just talking. I couldn't help but notice you see the dirt is darker at the door. It gets lighter as you go through the house. Yes, indeed. Linksy Project, wear one shoe, of course. Hop, yeah, yeah. I mean, this is the other funny thing. When I go to Australia, the reason I'm comfortable wearing shoes in the house is I see everyone else wearing shoes, and I don't feel like the floors are comfortable enough, are clean enough to take your shoes off. I feel like, like the floors are too dirty to not wear shoes in a lot of houses. That's another thing when you get back. And of course, I'm totally lost with the toilets. PB, how are the custom shoes holding up? Oh yeah, the running shoes, they're holding up good, except the shoelaces. A couple of times when I've been running segments, the shoelaces come loose, and it drives me crazy having to retie my shoelaces while I'm running. So I actually went and bought a set of running shoes that are tieless. You basically, they're kind of thick, so I just put these on the other day. I haven't actually gone for a run with them yet, but hopefully they will solve my problems of having to retie my shoelaces like once or twice every single time I run. But the shoes are good, and my times, I ran a 4-minute 12-second per kilometer 6K the other day, which is equal to the fastest time I've ever done a 6K. The shoes are great, love them. Thank you for asking, PB. Thank you for remembering. Yeah, Christopher Luke, popular things are often stupid. In fact, I mean, VH1 is proof of this. And yeah, I like a bit of stupid stuff myself, and I can understand that. But it's hard to sell, complicated stuff. But I think that's what the job of leaders is. And I think the reason a lot of old-fashioned politics is failing is because they patronize people by not explaining stuff to them anymore. They've gotten lazy. And, that opens the door to populists, and that's definitely what's happening. Cobras Tenchi sent it on Twitter. Okay, I will check. Oh, that's right. They are using a particular star. I forget which star it is exactly, but they are using a star to align the many segmented mirrors and get them into focus. And that'll take a long time, but that will still be very, very cool. I mean, it'll be an infrared photo, so it won't look like the Hubble will have prettier photos. But yeah, I cannot wait for that. Okay, that's cool. I will check that out. Thank you for the link. Quinn Rankett, have I considered double knots for my shoes so they don't come untied? Yes, I do. I do double bows. And somehow they just come loose. It's just the type of shoelaces that I have. So yes, believe me, I have tried different ways of tying my shoes to stop it, and it's annoying. But I've bought a solution. I've got some trail running tieless laces, which I've just laced my shoes with. So we'll see how those go. I'll give an update on that. But yes, so anyway, overtaking Japan. South Koreans see no reason to celebrate. Interesting one here. This was from Nikkei. But on a lot of indicators, so there's two things that I found interesting around this week. One, a lot of people with plans to come and get educated in Japan or to come and work in Japan are planning instead now to go to countries like Vietnam or South Korea and other Asian countries. And what's interesting, particularly about the choice to go to Korea, is that while Japan is probably still politically more of a heavyweight, a lot of people are raising the alarm that, Japan's losing its soft power, and this will increase Korea's soft power when it gets more international students and so on based over there. However, the other reason that people used to go to Korea for the interest of it, or like they would go to China, but they wouldn't go there for the money per se. It was just a bit of an adventure. But if you wanted to get some more money, I mean, Japan, the same English teaching jobs or whatever, always paid a lot more. So Japan always had, Japan was a place you could come to make money teaching, whereas Korea was a place you go more to explore, to do something that other people don't do. However, since this year, the average wage in Korea now exceeds that of Japan. The per capita GDP of South Korea also exceeds Japan. So a lot of these key indicators, Korea has started, like a lot of key indicators, is now overtaken Japan. And if you are a mercenary person who wants to go and teach English in Asia, Korea is no longer off the beaten path. So not only people are highlighting how Japan's sort of closed door immigration thing is not only hurting Japan's international exchange and soft power, but it's also offering an opportunity for people to realize that Japan is becoming more and more irrelevant. It's really accelerating that irrelevance, and it's actually making people realize that, well, actually, Japan is now going to become the place that people come to, not to make money, but just out of personal interest, and Korea is going to pick up all of that sort of attention. Now, that said, as happens when people become rich, more money, more problems, seems to be the mantra. You'd think that of all places that would be like, doing a big in-your-face parade. If you had asked South Korea in 1972, 50 years from now, when you overtake Japan on average salary and GDP, what do you think you're going to do? And I'm sure they all would have said, oh, we're going to have a big parade, And there'll be lots of mocking and rubbing their face in it. And they're totally not doing that. In fact, what's been remarkable about South Korean politics the last few years is it's becoming much less nationalist, at least not less focused on Japan. I guess that chip off the shoulder jealousy thing is gone, and they're realizing that they have all the same kind of problems that Japan has, demographic and economic. So yeah, it's kind of like on the one hand, this is just another thing where I do feel like people have been talking for a long time about how Japan is supposed to manage the bubble bursting and the population declining and getting old. And while a lot of economists have said, hey, you've got to rush in a lot of foreigners, you've got to get a bunch of young workers to increase tax to be able to keep the economy growing. And Japan has kind of done those things, but in a very, very mild sort of a way. And my interpretation has always been that the government's not really trying to maintain economic prosperity and growth. They're just trying to manage the decline. They're just trying to have a soft crash landing more than trying to keep the plane in the air, as it were. And I think that's, Japan's trying to figure out how it's going to get through the big, blip of elderly people becoming retired, and how they're going to be able to pay, ensure that they're not all dying in poverty, and that they don't, that the country doesn't collapse economically supporting them, as there are very, very few people around to support the elderly population, and they don't have enough foreigners to do it. Yet with Japan, it does seem to be a policy of managed decline, and from that perspective, South Korea overtaking Japan, although Korea very much on the same trajectory as Japan as well demographically, but after, it looks like this is just part of it. It's just inevitable that Japan is probably going to go from being like the richest, the place in Asia that you would go to make money, to just being, sort of economically a bit like living in more of a developing Asian country, like living in Thailand or the Philippines or Indonesia or something like that. I think Japan will still have a lot of influence, and it's never going to be like Indonesia, for example. There are certain characteristics, I think, just with Japan that just mean it's going to decline in a different way, but it's going to kind of become a new category. But no question, it is declining. And what's the way that they're handling the pandemic, isolating the country, is no doubt accelerating all of those things. Small businesses going out of business, foreigners not coming to cover the work anymore. So yeah, it is interesting that Korea is overtaking on those indicators. Oh yeah, and final story, which is just the thing I mentioned at the start, that someone in my kid's class tested positive today, so I'll have to go to his school tomorrow and pick up a test kit and get him tested. And he did have a 37.1 degree mild fever tonight, although the temperature was down to normal temperatures after, so it might have just been a blip. We'll see. But I do not want to get it, but it's unavoidable. If it's the lad, that's it. So hopefully I'll be fine next week. I'm sure I will be, actually, and I'll be getting boosted as soon as I can. Hope you are all doing well. Final brush through the comments. We've got John Carlo Lanoy. Am I aware of a strange festival in Japan? The Kanamara Festival, celebrated the first Sunday of April in Kawasaki. Never heard of it. Never heard of the penis festival. No. Not aware of any festival where they worship and parade enormous penises everywhere. No, never heard of it. Thank you for asking. I won't ask your motivation for asking, but yeah, I've never actually been to it, but yeah, it is kind of funny in a country which mosaics out genitalia that they have genitalia festivals, and everyone's like takes their kids and has a perfectly good time about it. It just shows again Victorian Prussian morality imposed upon original Japanese culture is just these are the consequences. Distracted there by the comment by Quint Rankin. Politicians don't explain, maybe not lazy, maybe they feel the plebs are too stupid to understand. Oh, that's exactly what I think. And I think that's what the plebs think the politicians think, and that's why they're getting thrown out. That's my biggest problem, actually, with center-right, center-left politicians who have dominated like the last 20, 30 years of politics. I think they've been doing the right things, but it's almost like they think it's beneath them to explain why they're doing things that cost jobs, like why free trade is good and why international exchange is good, and and people feel like they're being treated like idiots, and they want to kick them in the teeth, and they're doing it, and I understand that, actually, and I kind of feel I'm in a position where I agree with that mindset about opening up, but I want to kick them in the teeth too, because they should be explaining. I think they act arrogantly, and that is why their people are rejecting them. And people who realize that people are angry at that type of politics are doing well right now. I mean, that's all that Trump was, and I understand that. I mean, I'm angry for different reasons. I'm angry that they've failed to do their jobs properly. I'm not, but their arrogance is what's costing them, absolutely. And that'll hurt anybody. Erin, your daughter got COVID, but you didn't. Well, I'm sorry, dear. I hope your daughter's doing better. Yeah, I think my sister had the same thing, actually. Her daughter got it and she didn't get it. It's kind of mysterious how it works, isn't it? I'm glad to hear that anyway. And do take care. 73 elephants. To have 2% Maori ancestry, your Maori ancestors must have lived 7 or more generations ago. Although it's complicated because, you can have different, if it's all made up by one person, that's the case. But, it can get, and with New Zealand, it's actually, there's only like, well, it's increasing now, but there's only like 5 generations. Most people can even go back to European settlement. So it's probably a number of people. But yeah, good point. 73 elephants. It's a complicated business. Hey, Eddie, good to see you. Hey, Eddie, managing the crash, not really trying to prevent it, but that's definitely what I see the government doing here. And, I still think that depopulation and economy crashing has opportunities that I wish that they would exploit. Things like land reorganization, like making towns with less people just nicer places to live with more parks and stuff like that. They haven't figured out how to do that. And I think, you're much better off having a lot of really nice living spaces than having ghost towns. You're not going to attract people to come and move into run-down ghost towns. But if you actually have laws that allow you to nationalize and take over abandoned properties and make them into parks, you can actually attract people. So the government definitely is still trying to figure it out. But yeah, it does look like managed decline to me, which is a shame, but it is what it is. Yes, I see people talking about there are, by the way, festivals for man bits and lady bits, by the way. And I haven't been to either one of them, but they exist, and why wouldn't they? Even in most cultures, it's normal. I mean, fertility is an important thing. So, yes, indeed. Anyway, I am 10 minutes over. I said I didn't have very much to talk about, but as usual, I ran over time. It's very good to see you all. I hope that you're all staying safe. Remember, please do like if you liked. I do appreciate. I see there's 31 viewers at the moment and 18 likes. If you like keeping up with what's going on in Japan and you enjoy the show each week, I do appreciate if you could leave me a like. And that's really all that I'm doing it for. Remember, I will be posting on Twitter afterwards a link to the audio version of this. If you came in late and you want to catch it up and you prefer to listen to an audio version, I will put on the Anchor FM, which is also tied to a Spotify podcast. At this time, I'm not threatening to storm off a Spotify. I feel like I should be threatening to put more content onto Spotify. I don't know. Maybe is there a Joe Rogan lookalike demographic? I need to get a better tan if I want to go for that. But yeah, we'll see what works. For now, it's all free, and I'm basically here on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter. Have a good week, everybody. Stay safe. Ka kite ano. Push the like button. You got to do it. You got to do it. And I'll see you all later. Have a good one. See you, Odie Jr. See you, everybody. Boom. Peace. Ending stream. Ending it now. 2 clicks.